chaos.
Hurdles, kicks him in.
The player sued, accused of throwing furniture from his high-rise condo balcony.
We saw Antonio Brown pop up on a courtroom video feed in South Florida this Wednesday, staring down an attempted murder charge. And finally, after keeping his mouth shut for ages, Tom Brady is spilling the tea on why the locker room simply can't stomach Antonio Brown. You can't tell Brown's story without seeing the collision. It is pure genius, smashing headfirst into absolute madness. A career where world-class skill fought a losing battle against constant scandal. He didn't burst onto the scene. He snuck in as a sixth-round underdog from Central Michigan, undersized but quick as lightning, catching Mike Tomlin's eye during camp way back in 2010. The raw goods were there, with Tomlin noting that while the hands were ready, the player still had a serious mountain to climb. Brown didn't just climb that mountain, he went further than anybody predicted, blazing a trail that was as impressive on the turf as it was destructive off it. For years, he was simply unstoppable, ripping off 6 straight seasons with over 100 grabs and 1,200 yards to his name. By the book, he was a legend. But the narrative shifted from his incredible hands to his unbeatable ability to create drama. The cracks really started showing in Pittsburgh after a monster playoff game against the Chiefs in January 2017, where he shredded the defense for over 100 yards. Instead of celebrating the win like a pro, he hopped on Facebook Live, broadcasting the sacred locker room vibe and leaking Coach Tomlin's private trash talk about the Patriots to the entire world. The NFL hit his wallet. He's sure. But the stain on his character, that wasn't washing out. Brown decided the rulebook didn't apply to him, craving the spotlight at any cost. And things just spiraled downward over the next year. By 2018, he was dodging lawsuits for supposedly chucking furniture off a high-rise balcony, barely missing a toddler on the ground level. Then came the Porsche incident, clocking over 100 in a 45 zone, followed by a blow-up with Big Ben that led to him ghosting practice and getting benched for Week 17. That was the final nail in the coffin for his Steelers career. The writing was on the wall. And by February 2019, he hit Twitter to say goodbye, clearing the deck for a sequel that would be even crazier than the original. Oakland was pitched as his big second chance. The Raiders got him for a steal, just a 3rd and 5th rounder, but they quickly learned that Antonio Brown had zero intention of falling in line. He showed up to camp in July 2019 with flair. But before he caught a pass, he wrecked his feet with frostbite in a cryotherapy mishap. Then came the helmet saga, where he actually walked out because he refused to wear a safer model approved by the league. Even after fighting the NFL on it and losing, he bailed on practice again over the headgear, ramping up the friction with the front office. Brown took it to Instagram, blasting out a picture of a $54,000 fine letter from GM Mike Mayock with a caption basically saying, "If you hate on me, you're gonna pay." That afternoon, things got ugly on the field as he reportedly got in Mayock's face until teammates had to pull them apart. He gave a half-hearted apology to the squad, and Coach Gruden tried to smooth it over, claiming they were past the drama. But barely hours later, Brown dropped a YouTube clip featuring a secret recording of Gruden, which led to a massive fine that wiped out $30 million in guaranteed cash. Brown jumped back on Instagram, preaching that doing what's best for yourself is bound to make people angry. He claimed he wasn't bitter, just looking for the liberty to shut his critics up. The Raiders cut him loose immediately, but in a twist, he landed right in New England's lap. He inked a 1-year deal worth up to $15 million, but the ink was barely dry when a civil suit alleging assault by his former trainer hit the news. The Patriots didn't mess around, cutting him after a single game due to the scandal, leaving Brown to tweet. The marathon continues. Without a team, the internet became his battlefield. He spent his free time trolling Pittsburgh and taking shots at Juju Smith-Schuster, proving he was the ultimate toxic teammate even from the couch. After sitting out an 8-game suspension in 2020, he got another lifeline, joining the Buccaneers halfway through the season. Even with the baggage, the guy could play, racking up 45 catches and 4 scores in just 8 games. He peaked at Super Bowl 55. Snagging a touchdown to help crush the Chiefs and finally getting a ring on his finger. People thought he was reformed. But for Brown, a championship is just a pit stop between crises. The next year, the circus returned. First, an injury, then a suspension for lying about his vaccination status. He came back strong, but the self-destruct button was pressed during Week 17 against the Jets. In a surreal scene, he ripped off his pads, threw up a peace sign to the crowd, and marched out of the stadium while the game was still being played. Coach Arians cut him on the spot. And by 2023, Brown's life spiraled into something even darker. After fading from the NFL, he spent half a year in Dubai, living a lifestyle that looked completely detached from reality. But come November, reality finally came knocking. Marshals hauled Brown back to New Jersey before flying him down to Miami, where the situation exploded into a full-blown legal nightmare with heavy new charges, specifically second-degree attempted murder linked to a nasty showdown right outside a local boxing ring in Little Haiti. Law enforcement officials state that Brown jumped into a physical brawl following the event on May 16th. It started as a tussle with a guy named Zulkarnain Nantambu, but the temperature rose fast, and before long, shots rang out. Footage popped up, appearing to show Brown standing on the pavement, pistol in hand, taking shots at Nantambu as he scrambled for cover. 4 days later, the man told detectives Brown actually fired directly at him, maybe even clipping his neck, leaving him terrified he wouldn't make it out alive. The pushback from Brown's legal team was immediate and rock solid. His lawyer hammered home the point that this was strictly self-preservation, arguing there was zero intent to kill and that pulling the trigger was his only way to get out of there safely. Even the lawyer representing the accuser had to admit it was fuzzy whether a bullet actually connected, noting the injury looked like it could have just been a close shave. In the middle of this legal firestorm, Brown looked incredibly unshakable, flashing a grin and keeping his cool as he walked out of the Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center in Miami. Lenses caught the moment he embraced his counsel and made a beeline for a taco truck, looking completely unfazed by the heavy accusations hanging over his head. "God is great," he declared, repeating the spiritual mantra he has leaned on before, though his reality had turned into a high-stakes tightrope walk, confined to his home with a GPS tracker strapped to his ankle. He still got the green light to earn a living and support his massive brood, 7 kids with number 8 en route even while the court drama played out. Through it all, the receiver stayed true to his loud, unfiltered brand. Right after the dust settled on that May clash, he jumped on X to spin the narrative, claiming a group jumped him to snatch his jewelry and vowing he would be the one pressing charges against them. Yet, the whirlwind of drama Antonio kicked up fueled a lot of rage. And eventually, even Tom Brady shed light on exactly why the locker room turned against him. This beef between Brady and Brown isn't just about 2 gridiron legends. It is an epic tale involving raw skill, broken faith, and backstabbing that stretched across seasons, ending in a public explosion that left spectators stunned. One of the league's most dynamic playmakers, Brown first linked up with the quarterback up in New England. However, the real fireworks happened down in Tampa Bay, where Brady went to bat for him in 2020, personally demanding the Bucs sign the troubled star. He talked head coach Bruce Arians into taking a gamble on Brown's talent, genuinely hoping to see the man win at life. And for a hot minute, the plan actually clicked. The duo powered Tampa to a ring in Super Bowl 55, with Brown posting respectable stats while Brady acted as his shield against media heat and off-field antics. But behind the curtain, the foundation was crumbling. And in May of 2021, Brady fired off a personal text that would eventually blow up the headlines. TMZ leaked the message after Brown shared and then scrubbed it, revealing a note that was harsh but undeniably truthful. "You are making terrible choices and shutting out the very people who have bent over backwards to support you, acting totally self-centered while everyone around you is burnt out by your wild, unstable mood swings." The quarterback kept going, reminding him that when they first met, Brown was modest, eager to grow, and hungry to fix his life. In a blink, you turned it around and achieved some incredible milestones, setting yourself up for a long run of winning. Tragically, you have slid right back into being a childish, ego-driven guy who is acting reckless and not thinking straight. I have to say, I am let down by how you have been acting lately. It is like you completely threw away that thankfulness and humble attitude. You switched from surrounding yourself with solid folks who wanted you to win, to hanging with a crowd that is messy and out of control, dragging you down a dark road. This wasn't some out-of-the-blue message. It was a wake-up call after months of chaos where Brady tried to steer him right. But Brown chose to air it out for the world to see. Blasting those screenshots online turned their rift into internet gold, as he painted Brady's guidance as arrogant and small-minded, twisting confidential mentorship into a public spectacle. Almost instantly, the entire football world rallied behind the quarterback. Everyone from the bleachers to the broadcast booth saw a leader trying to save a drowning teammate, only to have the lifeline slapped away. And that is when things really went off the rails. 8 months down the line, he pulled his most notorious stunt ever, ripping off his pads and shirt in the middle of a game against the Jets and marching straight into the tunnel. That wild exit punched his ticket out of Tampa and basically killed his NFL future, though tension had been brewing over money long before that. With Brown stalling on his contract despite the championship run, rumor had it Brady was fed up with Brown's rep, voicing his annoyance over how the deal talks were dragging on. Finally, the receiver inked a 1-year pact worth $3.1 million loaded with performance bonuses. But the ink hadn't even dried before the drama flared up again. His paycheck now hinged on Brady feeding him the rock to hit those markers. And that pressure boiled over during the Week 17 matchup. Coach Arians later spilled that Brown lost it at halftime because he wasn't seeing enough targets, with insiders whispering that the outburst was all about the cash. The deal included fat checks for hitting 50 and 70 catches, 800 yards, plus 5 and 7 trips to the end zone. Falling short meant waving goodbye to a cool $1 million. Yet through it all, Brady kept trying to help, texting him to see a therapist and keep his head in the game. Instead of listening, Brown turned those texts into ammo for his social media war, posting the receipts and making fun of the guidance, which snapped the bond for good. The beef got even uglier when Brown started taking cheap shots at the quarterback's private world. He relentlessly trolled him over his split with Gisele Bündchen, arguing that Brady only cared about him as long as he was catching passes. Telling the Full Send podcast, "Tom Brady is my friend. Why? Because I am a beast on the field. He needs me to win. We just view friendship differently." Yet despite the insult, Brady stayed classy. He wouldn't take the bait, dodging the reporters' probing questions and refusing to let the mudslinging break his poise. Behind closed doors, however, the hurt was real, with an insider telling the Daily Mail that Tom had carried Antonio for ages and backed him through every roller coaster moment. But as Antonio ramped up the trash talk and the vibes turned toxic, Tom just kept it classy, refusing to get down in the mud. The last few years, though absolute tailspin, the friendship is dead and buried, replaced by a mountain of legal nightmares. Brown faced an attempted murder charge at a Florida boxing event in 2024, bolting to Dubai before getting dragged back to the States. Insiders say that was the final straw. Brady is done bailing him out. That mentorship, that bond that used to define them, gone. Brady has said time and again he just wanted to see the guy win at life. Sitting down on Logan Paul's Impulsive podcast, he put it simply, "I wanted the best for him. I saw this spark in him, something that could have been legendary if channeled right, not just for the roster, but for his whole existence. I always root for success." But Brown's decisions kept blowing up that foundation. From contract drama and social media jabs to that bizarre shirtless exit mid-game and the law trouble, Brown systematically burned every single bridge he crossed. It wasn't always a disaster, though. Down in Tampa Bay, Brady actually went to bat for him, fighting hard to get Brown a spot on the squad. And it paid off. Brown snagged 45 catches for 483 yards and 4 touchdowns across 8 games during that Super Bowl tear. That ring was a direct product of Brady's faith and leadership. But even a championship couldn't outweigh the hurricane of personal chaos Brown brought into the locker room. Looking back, the Brady-Brown saga is the ultimate lesson in talent versus temperament. Brown had the raw ability to be an all-time great, but his massive ego and habit of torching relationships alienated everyone from teammates to coaches. Brady, meanwhile, was the rock steady, invested, but he couldn't steer the ship for Brown. Now, let's pivot to the other NFL stars who had real beef with Antonio Brown and see how those sparks flew. Antonio Brown and Ben Roethlisberger spent nearly a decade in Pittsburgh. forging one of the most lethal quarterback-receiver connections the league has ever witnessed. Between 2010 and 2018, the stat sheet proved just how unstoppable they were when they were on the same page. Roethlisberger suited up for 129 games in that span, completing 3,084 passes for 41,049 yards, with 275 touchdowns and 129 interceptions. Brown appeared in 130 games, hauling in 837 passes for 11,027 yards and 74 touchdowns. On the field, they were magic. Behind closed doors, they were oil and water. Insiders described two radically different philosophies when it came to prep. Brown treated every single practice rep like it was the Super Bowl, sprinting full tilt even when working with the second and third string arms. While Roethlisberger took rest days, former long snapper Cameron Canaday noted Brown's relentless grind at training camp, calling him easily one of the hardest workers on the turf. He said Brown's intensity was stuck on high, which created friction because Roethlisberger, a vet with 2 rings and a battered body, played the long game with a more conservative approach. Big Ben often dialed back the physical work during the week to save his arm for game day, a privilege he felt he'd earned through years of combat. That contrast slowly morphed from a quirk into a serious conflict. Brown craved more live reps with his QB during the week, convinced that skipping them was throwing off their Sunday timing. Whenever the offense sputtered or signals got crossed, Brown viewed it as proof that he and Roethlisberger just weren't on the same wavelength mentally. Canaday explained that Brown's frustration stemmed from demanding that same maniacal urgency from everyone else. When he didn't see it, problems started brewing. Things finally boiled over after a loss to the Denver Broncos in 2018. Roethlisberger called Brown out on his weekly radio spot, blaming a bad route for a costly interception. That comment rippled through the locker room and infuriated Brown, who felt that kind of laundry should be aired in private, not on the airwaves. Add that to the simmering resentment over practice habits, and the dam broke. The relationship shattered late in the 2018 season. During a walkthrough before Week 17, the two got into a screaming match. Brown stormed out of the facility and ghosted the team for the rest of the week. The Steelers tried to cover it up with a knee injury designation, but everyone knew it was a disciplinary suspension. Pittsburgh benched him for the season finale. They missed the playoffs, and that was a wrap on Brown's time in Steel City. He was shipped off to the Raiders as soon as the offseason hit. Once he was out of Pittsburgh, Brown took the gloves off and openly bashed Roethlisberger. He accused Ben of having an owner mentality, acting like he was untouchable and could trash teammates without blowback just because he was the franchise golden boy. The public mudslinging dragged into the 2019 offseason, with Brown firing back at Roethlisberger's interviews and telling him to quit living in the past. Their interactions during that stretch showed just how toxic the whole situation had become. Despite the ugly breakup, Brown eventually owned his part in the mess. Years later, he expressed some regret, admitting he let emotions and outside noise hijack his behavior. He even posted tributes to Roethlisberger later on, calling him the best quarterback he ever played with and admitting their chemistry was something he never found again. Roethlisberger, for his part, has gone on record wishing he had handled the friction differently. Then there's Ryan Clark. He and Antonio Brown weren't just guys sharing a locker room in Pittsburgh. They started as buddies, morphed into rivals, and ended up in one of the nastiest public feuds the franchise had seen in ages. Clark was the respected vet, the voice of reason. Brown was the hungry, explosive young gun who arrived with boatloads of talent, ambition, and a personality that demanded attention. At first, they were tight. Clark actually helped guide Brown through the rookie ropes trainers, rehab, life stuff. But the second Brown's star began to rise, the dynamic cracked. The tipping point hit during training camp in 2012. That same day, Brown inked a massive extension that made him one of the highest-paid guys on the team. During one-on-ones, a defensive back took a cheap shot and slapped Brown's helmet, a total no-go. Even in practice, Brown didn't hesitate. He fired back the very next rep, slapped the defender, got open, and snagged the ball. Defensive coordinator Dick LeBeau stepped in, furious, and Brown just completely lost it. He unleashed a verbal assault on LeBeau, stood his ground, and screamed that he wouldn't tolerate disrespect from a single soul, whether they wore a headset or a helmet. That's the exact moment the defense charged in. Guys from both squads dove into the pile, turning a standard drill into an absolute riot, with even Troy Polamalu getting in the mix. Fuses blew completely, and the whole session dissolved into mayhem. Ryan Clark was watching from a distance, but the moment he heard Brown shouting about his fresh contract, something inside him snapped. He roared out. Giving him that money was a huge mistake. I knew the cash would twist his mind. That specific line haunted Brown for years, a point he constantly brings up to argue that pure envy was the real engine driving their feud. The bad blood only boiled over after Clark hung up his cleats and took a desk at ESPN. He wasted no time becoming one of the fiercest critics to blast Brown's antics on national television. The tardiness, the diva attitude, the sideline meltdowns, and finally the absolute circus that defined the bitter, chaotic finale of his career in Pittsburgh. Clark hit the circuit on first take, branding the star unprofessional, toxic, and even calling him a cancer to the team. Brown fired back in typical fashion, loud, aggressive, and for the whole world to see. He went on the attack on X, labeling Clark a traitor and accusing him of using their history as ammunition just to chase clout and grab ratings. Sound off with your take in the comments below. And before you bounce, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to NFL Rivals so you never miss our future drops.